You, Philip. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome for being here in today's meeting. I'm especially wanna welcome Chad and Rick. They accepted to be my helpers today because my goal is to ask some questions. We previously decided on a topic, and I will be listening and moderating their speeches. Chad, thank you for being here. Could you please uh, tell me about social media? Does social media do more harm than good to the mental health? What do you think?
So I think that's an interesting question. And I think to answer that, I would say it's really in the eye of the beholder. I think social media has a lot of great implications. It connects people that otherwise might not be able to communicate based on their how far away they live from one another, or a variety of different perspectives. However, I think it also has a dark side where people, there's a book recently, I think, that came out called Dopamine Generation or something of that nature. And it was speaking to the fact that you can get addicted to this. So as much as it can start off as a great tool, it can end being a very negative tool in a lot of people's lives where you feel addicted to keep, getting likes or constantly scrolling, looking for that next dopamine hit. And so I think it can be very much a great thing on one hand, but it can also be a source of a lot of negativity and potentially problems in one's life if it's allowed to get out of control.
Thank you, Chad. Definitely, I agree. Social media is great. Avoid short distances between people, and agree is between. It has a good part, but also it's a dark side. Rick, in that lines, how do you think individuals can maintain a healthy relationship with social media?
The question is how individuals, was that for me?
No, that's for Rick.
Oh, I'm sorry, my bad.
I think it's everything. It's in moderation, right? It's exercising or doing some calisthenics to work on your mental fortitude in order to pay attention to how these kinds of things are affecting you. I think of our generation, I'll look around the room, I think most of the people in this room who probably didn't grow up with social media, I feel like the effect on me, while I have my own challenges with it, is a little bit less. But I look at, say, my 19-year-old daughter or friends who are maybe preteens, it seems to be, the mental aspect seems to be a lot harder to deal with. So there's a monitoring and a coaching situation, I think, that has to happen as things go on. So it's just a matter of paying attention to what you're doing and what the main purpose is, I think.
Thank you. That I 100% agree. Our feeling probably is different because we didn't grow up with social media, different than this generation. In that lines, Rick, I have a follow-up question. Do you believe that the platforms should be accountable for the content that they allowed in social media?
No. I say that very quickly and a little bit flippantly, but no, I think that the platforms don't necessarily have a responsibility to be responsible. Do they have it's a slippery slope. When you start saying that this one thing you should be responsible for not promoting hate speech, true, but then what defines hate speech, right? Without getting political, I look at what the next 4 or 5, 6 months in this country is going to look like and how that definition of hate speech might radically change. So keeping companies responsible for that in an evolving situation is incredibly difficult.
Okay, thank you. No, definitely you responded right away. I would like to hear from Chad, since from your job, your career, you probably have a little bit more contact on the social media. So what do you believe the platform should be accountable for the content that they allowed in social media?
So I think there's a couple perspectives on that. I tend to agree with Rick in the sense that I think the people are responsible for themselves and there needs to be some personal accountability. However, I also don't agree that there should be platforms that allow people to engage in illicit, unlawful activities that negatively impact the quality of life for other people. So I think it's a little bit of a double-edged sword, but I tend to lean more heavily on the side of not infringing on people's First Amendment rights. I know a variety of people have different stances on that. But I truly believe that, again, like what Greg and I do for a living, it's here to afford people that opportunity to express themselves. And I think that it's a slippery slope and a very fine line as far as how much government intervention there is on topics like that. So again, I think personal accountability is key, but I don't agree in setting up a place where people can just turn it into a cesspool. And I think they should be out doing calisthenics anyway. It's safer for everybody.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, absolutely. I agree. So Greg, Rick, influencers. I know you mentioned before, we didn't grow up with these influencers, probably with a little bit impact by influencers. Do you think that influencers, they create unrealistic expectations for the people who follow them?
I do. I think how we all present ourselves, and I'll include myself in that, in social media is pretty much just the best light, right? And that's whether it's how I'm living my life or what I'm wearing or what I'm doing in the places I'm traveling to. Right? And I think that's the case for the influencers whose job it is to look like they're doing as best they can. So I think that, again, from an age perspective, I don't particularly pay attention to influencers per se, but I was influenced, without influence. I was having a conversation with a good friend of mine who's just in her late 20s, and she was showing me a new hair dryer. And I was like, "Oh, that's a really cool hair dryer. Like, how'd you learn about that?" She's like, "Oh, because all the beauty influencers on TikTok are talking about it. It's the #1 rated hair dryer on TikTok." And I didn't understand that very well. Like, just that whole point.
Yeah, agree. Chat, in 10 seconds, can you tell me if influencers have unrealistic expectations for people?
Yes, influencers definitely have set unrealistic expectations. Much like Rick said, they're talking through filters and oftentimes AI developed content. So I think that anybody trying to compare themselves to an influencer, it's a fool's game. You're never going to amount to the levels that they portray, and quite frankly, their lives in the real world usually aren't reflected what they're showing on social media. So
yeah, 100% agree. Influencers are just making their money on behalf of the people who follow them. I realized myself that I should delink to the influencers because the expectations are not realistic. I really appreciate Chad and Rick accepting my invitation to help me with this project. I have to say that I like the new format that Pathways has in Toastmasters. The projects change. At least I like this kind of like mixing and matching, not just delivering and speech, just creating the different formats. With that, I want to thank everybody, and back to you, Philip. Thank you so much.